The USB drive felt like a ticking bomb in my pocket as I walked into the office that Tuesday morning, knowing full well it contained evidence that would destroy my boss's career. What I didn't know was that he'd already decided to destroy mine first. By noon, I was being escorted out by security. My 7 years of dedication reduced to a cardboard box of personal belongings and a severance check that felt more like hush money. My name is Isabella Thompson, and this is the story of how I turned my greatest professional betrayal into the sweetest revenge imaginable. It all started 6 months earlier when I was still naive enough to believe that hard work and loyalty meant something at Meridian Financial Solutions. I was 32, ambitious, and foolishly devoted to a company that saw me as nothing more than a disposable asset. As senior financial analyst, I'd climbed the ladder through sheer determination, working late nights and weekends, missing family gatherings and social events, all in pursuit of that elusive promotion that my boss, David Brennan, kept dangling in front of me like a carrot. Brennan was the kind of man who wore expensive suits to mask his cheap character, tall, silver-haired, and possessed of the kind of confidence that comes from never having to face real consequences. He ruled the finance department with an iron fist wrapped in corporate speak. He had a way of making you feel grateful for the opportunity to work yourself to death for his benefit, and I'd fallen for it completely. The first crack in my faith came during a routine audit preparation. I was working late, as usual, when I noticed discrepancies in our quarterly reports. Small things at first, numbers that didn't quite add up, expenses that seemed inflated, revenue streams that appeared out of nowhere. My analytical mind couldn't let it go, so I dug deeper. What I found made my blood run cold. Brennan wasn't just cooking the books. He was running an elaborate scheme that siphoned money from client accounts into offshore holdings. The man I'd respected and worked tirelessly for was nothing more than a common thief in a $1,000 suit. I spent weeks gathering evidence, copying files, and building an airtight case. My plan was simple: present the evidence to the board, watch justice unfold, and hopefully earn the respect and promotion I'd been chasing. I was going to be the whistleblower who saved the company from corruption. I should have known better. The morning I planned to present my findings to the board, Brennan called me into his office. The moment I walked in, I knew something was wrong. His usual fake smile was replaced by a cold, calculating stare that made my skin crawl. "Isabella," he said, leaning back in his leather chair like a predator sizing up its prey, "I've been reviewing your performance, and I'm afraid we need to have a difficult conversation." My heart pounded as I realized what was happening. Somehow, he knew what I'd discovered. Maybe he'd been monitoring my computer access, or perhaps someone had seen me working late too many nights. Either way, I was walking into a trap. "I don't understand," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My performance reviews have all been exemplary." "Have they?" He opened a file on his desk with theatrical precision. "Because I'm seeing a pattern of insubordination, missed deadlines, and questionable judgment that suggests you're not the team player we need here at Meridian." The accusations were absurd, and we both knew it. I'd never missed a deadline, never questioned his authority publicly, and my judgment had saved the company millions over the years. But he continued, building his fictional case against me with the practiced ease of a man who'd probably done this before. "Furthermore," he continued, "there have been concerns about your access to sensitive financial data. Some irregularities have been flagged by our security systems, and I'm afraid we can't ignore the possibility that you've been using your position inappropriately." The irony was staggering. He was accusing me of the very crimes he'd been committing, setting me up as the fall guy for his own corruption. It was a masterful move, I had to admit, even as it destroyed my faith in everything I'd believed about justice and corporate integrity. "This is ridiculous," I protested, but I could see it was useless. The decision had already been made. "You can't just fabricate accusations because you don't like me." "I'm not fabricating anything," he said smoothly. "I'm simply protecting the company from a potentially damaging situation. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out, and you'll receive your final paycheck and severance package within the week." As if on cue, 2 security guards appeared at his door. The humiliation was complete. I was marched through the office like a common criminal, past colleagues who averted their eyes in embarrassment. My personal belongings hastily shoved into a cardboard box like I was some nobody who'd never contributed anything to the company. But Brennan had made one crucial mistake. In his arrogance, he'd underestimated me. The USB drive in my pocket contained everything I'd gathered about his schemes, and terminating my employment had just freed me from any legal obligations to keep his secrets. The first few days after my termination were dark. I oscillated between rage and despair, questioning everything I'd believed about my career and my worth. But gradually, anger crystallized into something more powerful: determination. I began researching Brennan's background more thoroughly, using my severance time to dig into his past. What I found was a pattern of similar behavior at his previous companies. He'd join a firm, work his way up through charm and manipulation, siphon what he could, then disappear before anyone caught on. Meridian was just his latest target, but this time would be different. This time, he'd picked the wrong person to betray. I started reaching out to former colleagues from his previous companies, people who'd been mysteriously terminated or had quit under suspicious circumstances. What I found was a network of talented professionals who'd all been burned by the same man. Financial analysts, auditors, compliance officers, all of them had stories similar to mine. Among them was Marcus Chen, a former senior auditor who'd been fired from Brennan's previous company for supposedly falsifying reports. Like me, Marcus had discovered irregularities and had been framed for the very crimes he'd tried to expose. Unlike me, he'd been too devastated to fight back at the time. I should have done something, Marcus told me during one of our phone calls. I had the evidence, but I was so destroyed by the betrayal that I just crawled away and tried to rebuild my life. I've regretted it every day since. What if I told you we could still do something? I asked. What if we could not only expose him, but destroy his ability to hurt anyone else? That conversation was the beginning of what would become the most satisfying chapter of my professional life. Marcus and I began developing a plan that went far beyond simple whistleblowing. We were going to hit Brennan where it hurt most: his wallet and his reputation. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would start our own financial consulting firm, targeting the exact same market segment as Meridian. Using our combined expertise and contacts, we would build a reputation for integrity and excellence that would make Brennan's corruption impossible to hide. But we needed more than just good intentions. We needed capital, credibility, and most importantly, clients. That's where my network of former colleagues came in. Over the years, I'd built relationships with dozens of potential clients who'd been impressed by my work at Meridian. Now, it was time to leverage those relationships. I started reaching out to former clients, explaining my situation in carefully crafted terms. I couldn't directly accuse Brennan of fraud, that would come later, but I could express my desire to provide more personalized, ethical service than what large firms typically offered. The response was overwhelming. Apparently, my reputation for integrity and competence had preceded me. Within a month, I had 3 major clients ready to sign contracts with my yet-to-be-formed company. Marcus and I incorporated Thompson & Associates Financial Consulting, with me as the majority owner and him as my partner. We rented a small office space in the financial district, hired 2 junior analysts who'd also been casualties of Brennan's management style, and began building our reputation one client at a time. The business grew faster than I'd dared hope. Our commitment to transparency and ethical practices stood out in an industry that often prioritized profits over principles. Within 6 months, we'd grown from 4 employees to 12, and our client base had expanded to include some of the most prestigious companies in the city. But personal success wasn't enough. I wanted Brennan to pay for what he'd done, not just to me, but to all the people he'd destroyed over the years. That's when I began implementing the second phase of my plan. I started documenting everything I discovered about Brennan's schemes, organizing it into a comprehensive report that would be impossible to ignore. But I didn't stop there. I began reaching out to investigative journalists, regulatory agencies, and former clients who might have been affected by his fraud. The breakthrough came when I connected with a reporter from the Financial Tribune who'd been investigating irregularities in the financial services industry. When I presented my evidence, her eyes lit up with the kind of excitement that only comes from stumbling onto a major story. "This is huge," she said, reviewing the documents I'd compiled. "If we can verify even half of this, it'll be front-page news. But we need more than just your word. We need corroboration from multiple sources." That's when I revealed my network of former colleagues who'd all been burned by Brennan. Marcus, along with 3 other professionals from different companies, all came forward with their own evidence and testimonies. The pattern was undeniable. While the investigation was ongoing, I focused on growing my business. The irony wasn't lost on me that my company was succeeding in large part because of the very values that Brennan had tried to destroy in me. Our commitment to honesty, transparency, and client service was attracting exactly the kind of high-value clients that Meridian depended on. The first major blow came 6 months after I'd started my company. One of Meridian's biggest clients, a multinational corporation that I'd worked with extensively during my time there, approached me about switching their account to my firm. Their CFO, a woman named Patricia Rodriguez, had been impressed by my work for years and had been looking for an excuse to leave Meridian. "I never trusted Brennan," she confided during our initial meeting. "There was something about him that set off alarm bells. When I heard you'd started your own firm, I knew it was time to make a change." Landing that account was worth more than just the revenue. It was validation that my approach was working. More importantly, it sent a clear message to the financial community that Thompson & Associates was a force to be reckoned with. The second major blow came in the form of a staff exodus. Word had gotten out that I was hiring, and suddenly I was being contacted by talented professionals who wanted to work for a company that valued integrity. Among them were several key employees from Meridian who'd grown tired of Brennan's toxic management style. My former colleague, Jennifer Walsh, was the first to make the jump. She'd been one of Brennan's most valuable analysts, and her departure left a significant gap in Meridian's capabilities. When she joined my firm, she brought with her intimate knowledge of Brennan's operations and access to several more clients who were considering switching. "I should have left years ago," Jennifer told me during her first week. "The culture there is poisonous, and everyone knows it. People are just too scared to speak up because they've seen what happens to those who do." Within 3 months, I'd hired away 5 of Meridian's top performers. Each departure weakened Brennan's position and strengthened mine. The financial services industry is smaller than people think, and word travels fast. Soon, everyone knew that Thompson & Associates was where the best talent was going. But the killing blow came from an unexpected source. The journalist I'd been working with published her exposé on a Wednesday morning, and by Thursday afternoon, Brennan's world was falling apart. The article was devastating. It detailed years of financial fraud, client account manipulation, and systematic intimidation of employees who tried to expose the truth. The evidence was overwhelming, and the story was picked up by major news outlets within hours. The regulatory response was swift and brutal. The SEC launched an immediate investigation, freezing Meridian's assets and suspending several key executives pending a full audit. Client withdrawals began almost immediately, as companies rushed to distance themselves from the scandal. But the most satisfying moment came when Brennan called me personally. I was in my office, watching the news coverage of Meridian's collapse, when my phone rang. His name appeared on the caller ID, and I couldn't help but smile as I answered. "Isabella." His voice was strained, desperate. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. We need to talk." "I don't think we do," I replied calmly. "I think the situation is perfectly clear." "You don't understand what you've done," he said, and I could hear the panic creeping into his voice. "You've destroyed everything, not just me, but the entire company. Hundreds of jobs, thousands of client relationships. Was your petty revenge worth all that?" The accusation of pettiness stung, but only for a moment. "This isn't about revenge," I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. "This is about justice, about making sure you can't hurt anyone else the way you hurt me and so many others." "I can make this right," he pleaded. "I can give you whatever you want." a position at the company, a partnership, anything. Just tell me what it will take. What I want, I said, is for you to face the consequences of your actions. What I want is for people to know that integrity matters, that you can't just destroy people's lives and careers without paying a price. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When he spoke again, his voice was cold and defeated. You have no idea what you've unleashed. This won't end with me. You're right, I said. It won't. It'll end with a financial services industry that's a little more honest, a little more accountable, and that's worth more than any promotion you could have given me. The line went dead, and I never heard from him again. The aftermath was everything I'd hoped for, and more. Brennan was arrested within a week, charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and securities violations. The trial was a media circus, with victim after victim testifying about how he'd destroyed their careers and stolen their money. Marcus testified about his experience at Brennan's previous company, detailing how he'd been framed for crimes he'd tried to expose. Jennifer and several other former Meridian employees testified about the toxic culture and systematic intimidation that had allowed the fraud to continue for years. When my turn came, I spoke not just as a victim, but as someone who'd found the strength to fight back. I detailed the evidence I'd gathered, the investigation I'd launched, and the network of professionals I'd assembled to bring Brennan to justice. This man didn't just steal money, I told the jury. He stole careers, dreams, and faith in the very system that's supposed to protect us. But he made one crucial mistake. He underestimated the power of people who refused to be silenced. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Brennan was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. His assets were seized to pay restitution to his victims, and he was banned from working in the financial services industry for life. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the business I'd built from the ashes of my destroyed career. Thompson & Associates had grown into one of the most respected financial consulting firms in the city. With over 30 employees and a client roster that included some of the most prestigious companies in the region. We'd absorbed most of Meridian's former clients, along with many of their best employees. The company that had once seemed so powerful and permanent had effectively ceased to exist. While my firm had grown stronger with each passing month, more importantly, we'd changed the culture of the industry. Our commitment to transparency and ethical practices had forced other firms to raise their standards. Whistleblower protections had been strengthened, and regulatory oversight had been increased. The financial services industry wasn't perfect, but it was better than it had been. The personal satisfaction was immense, but what meant the most to me was the impact on the people who'd been hurt by Brennan's schemes. Marcus had become my partner and closest friend, finally able to rebuild the career that had been destroyed by false accusations. Jennifer had been promoted to senior vice president and was thriving in an environment where her talents were valued and her integrity was respected. Most of the other professionals who'd been casualties of Brennan's toxic management had found new positions, either at my firm or with other companies that valued their experience and expertise. The network of support we'd built during our investigation had become a permanent fixture in the industry, helping talented professionals find opportunities and protecting them from predatory managers. As I sit in my corner office today, looking out at the city skyline and the thriving business I've built, I sometimes think about that Tuesday morning when I walked into Meridian with a USB drive full of evidence and a naive belief in corporate justice. I was so focused on playing by the rules, on working within the system, that I never imagined the system itself might be corrupt. Brennan taught me that sometimes the only way to fight corruption is to step outside the system entirely. By firing me, he'd freed me from any obligation to protect his secrets or preserve his power. He'd given me the motivation and the freedom to build something better. The USB drive that had felt like a ticking bomb in my pocket that morning had indeed exploded, but not in the way I'd expected. Instead of destroying my career, it had launched it. Instead of ending my story, it had begun it. Today, Thompson & Associates employs over 50 people and generates more revenue than Meridian ever did. We've expanded into new markets, developed innovative services, and built a reputation for excellence that attracts the best talent and the most prestigious clients. But the real measure of success isn't in the numbers on our balance sheet. It's in the thank you notes from employees who feel valued and respected, the referrals from satisfied clients, and the knowledge that we've helped make the financial services industry a little more honest and accountable. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the path I took, if I wish I'd just kept my head down, ignored the corruption, and continued climbing the corporate ladder at Meridian. The answer is always the same: absolutely not. Brennan thought he was destroying me when he fired me that Tuesday morning. What he was actually doing was setting me free to become everything I was meant to be. He thought he was protecting himself from exposure, but he was actually ensuring his own destruction. The best revenge, as they say, is living well. But sometimes, the best revenge is also justice, growth, and the satisfaction of knowing that you've made the world a little better than you found it. My name is Isabella Thompson, and this is the story of how I turned my greatest professional betrayal into my greatest professional triumph. It's the story of how a USB drive full of evidence became the foundation of a business empire, and how a man who thought he could destroy me ended up destroying himself instead. In the end, integrity won. Justice prevailed. And I learned that sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply refusing to stay down when someone tries to knock you out. Brennan is serving his sentence in a federal prison. His reputation destroyed, his fortune seized, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked corporate power. I'm running a thriving business, mentoring young professionals, and living proof that good people can still win in a world that often seems designed to reward the corrupt. The USB drive is still in my desk drawer, a reminder of where this journey began. Sometimes I take it out and hold it, remembering that Tuesday morning when everything changed. It's a reminder that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to do what's right even when you're terrified of the consequences. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, doing what's right turns out to be the best decision you've ever made.